Hello, I am Kristen. Welcome to my corner of the internet. Today I'm going to be talking about what I learned when I was living in Seoul as a Minerva student. If you don't know about Minerva, check out some other videos first because it's a lot. So I'm just going to dive straight into my experience in Seoul, South Korea. So I've been doing 5 things for these videos. If you want to check out the other ones I've done about my new perspectives, click up there for a playlist. Number 1, for the biggest thing that I learned in Seoul, is what collectivism really means. So people talk about the United States and a lot of the West being individualist, and then a lot of Eastern Asian cultures in particular being more collectivist. And I knew the definitions, but it's hard to understand how those definitions of collectivism means people put relationships and others before themselves. It's hard to understand what that really manifests as, and it's hard to really know what that looks like in daily life. So I experienced this, and I kind of put more of a feeling to those words. So some things that really resonated with me that I think demonstrate that Korea is a more collectivist culture is that people put respect towards strangers in a very high priority. So on the subway, people are very quiet, and you get sort of mean looks if you're being loud for disturbing other people. People also genuinely line up. I don't know if I'm British or American. My best friend speaks British English. But so they genuinely queue for the subway. They will stand in line, and then when the subway comes up, the people go out through the middle between 2 lines on a door, and then the 2 lines go in. And it's very orderly. Even during rush hour when commuting is a mess, those sort of laws, unwritten laws, are still very much in place, which I think reflects that people are thinking of the collective and not just themselves. Number 2 of the things that I opened my mind to in Seoul is that I really understood what a big or truly massive city looks like and feels like in Seoul, because before that I hadn't really been in a big city in the same way. And by this I mainly mean I hadn't been in that densely of a populated city that was still so big in area. The fact that Seoul had so many 20-story buildings just all over the place. The sky did not exist in that city. And yet it was also took you an hour to go from one side to the other side. Just the scale. My microphone fell over. Just the scale of that was absolutely crazy to me, and helped me really understand what it means to live in cities, especially outside the US, because in the US there's a few cities we have like that, but we're a lot more sprawling. We've got a lot of space, a lot of suburbs. So that was crazy to me, just how big Seoul was. Number 3, and this is more because Seoul was my first culture shock, I think, but I came to realize just how many things about the way you act are really culturally relative. So even the way that you act in a restaurant or the norms around ordering food can be different in different countries, and that when you go into a restaurant in a new country, it's very likely that you're going to do something wrong because there's just a normal way of doing things that isn't your normal way of doing things. And I think the fact that culture really did come down to that minutia, and it wasn't just these big ideas like collectivism, but also things that didn't fall into those sort of categories that were just how people acted, really created the concept of what a culture is. I think what this more so boils down to is that going to Seoul helped me understand what culture means, because I finally had something to compare my lived experiences to recognize when things were different based on different norms, and the fact that that's what really amounted to a culture when you put it all together. Number 4, this one is particularly aimed at Americans and my Americanness, and that is that alcohol and drinking ages aren't this, like, big deal taboo thing in most other countries the same way that they are in the US. Like, in the US, there's a huge underage drinking problem, culture, whatever you want to call it, and there's, like, this weird feeling that that's super wrong and that you're really rebelling by doing that. Yet, if you take that 19-year-old that is, like, breaking laws in the United States and put them in Korea, they can buy alcohol at a corner store without anyone even asking for their ID because they look like they're probably about an adult. And the fact that it's not this, like, taboo also makes it seem just more relaxed, and, like, you don't need to, like, go out there and get smashed and get completely destroyed with this, like, liquor that you got your hands on, because it's like, if I like soju, I'll just run down and grab some and drink it, maybe with some friends, but it's whatever. I think the, like, rebelliousness of drinking underage in the US kind of, like, adds to the intrigue, because honestly, when I was in Seoul and it was super easy to get alcohol, I was like, whatever. And I think that would apply to a lot of Americans. Like, once it's easy to access, it's not as much of a, like, intriguing thing. As a side note to that, the same scale exists for, like, drug use and, like, smoking cigarettes. Like, in the US, cigarettes are, like, super, like, gross, no, but yet in Seoul, like, smoking cigarettes was still super normal. In the US, it's pretty normal to do, like, drugs at, like, music festivals or whatever, even if they, like, are trying to stop you. It's pretty somewhat expected and semi-accepted, not by law enforcement, but by, like, the other people at the festival. Whereas in Korea, drugs are, like, massively taboo. Absolute no-no, really harsh consequences. So just that, like, all of those taboo substances in particular, as well as, like, sexual norms and that sort of blah, they're all very different from culture to culture, and that just because you've been taught that something is taboo, it might actually be good to kind of chill and, like, not think of it in that really taboo way. At least for me. I like being chill about stuff. Who do I think I am? Okay, number 5 is that consumerism is truly wild. And I'm a victim of it, clearly. I have other videos where you can see this. But I think this was partially because it was, like, really big metropolitan area that had a lot of different people. So I'd come from San Francisco, where it was a lot more of, like, a young professional vibe, whereas Seoul has, like, literally the entire spectrum of humans that are Korean for the most part. But, so, I saw a lot more, like, younger people and people that wouldn't, like, fall into the Silicon Valley type of person, and a lot more people in Seoul really cared about fashion, makeup, skincare. There were shops everywhere. So many stores. I think this is also because, like, growing up in the US during the recession, I saw a lot of shops close. So the fact that there were just so many retail locations thriving in Seoul, like, one per person, maybe I'll look up a statistic. But there would be, like, just so many. Like, they're in subway stops. Like, when you go underground to the subway, there's also, like, a whole mall down there, basically. There's stores, obviously, on the street. There's, like, tons of huge malls. Just, like, you can buy so many things everywhere. And that sort of amount of stuff, and the fact that so many people were buying all that stuff, was kind of crazy to me, coming from, like, a slightly cheap middle class America. during / post-recession background. I don't remember what my point was here, but basically in Seoul I was constantly being hit by the consumerism and like, why aren't you being consumerist? And I was like, you're right, I should be being consumerist, except I was like probably my poorest in Seoul and spending like all of my money just to feed myself, so I didn't buy that much stuff. But consumerism, man, it was like really out there in Seoul. Retail, really out there. Korean beauty, Korean fashion, all of that, I live for it, obviously. I don't know how obvious that is. I love it. I love that culture, but yeah, it was a bit jostling. That's my whole point on that. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you want to see more of this kind of stuff, be sure to subscribe. If you're interested in Minerva or traveling all over the place or just the stuff that you learn as a young adult, that's the kind of things I like to talk about. And leave a comment if you have any questions about anything I said. I try to answer as many comments as I can. And I'll see you next time. Bye! I really need to figure out a new outro. Somebody tell me a new outro to do. Okay. I have a bun. Look at my bun. My room's a mess, I know. You don't need to tell me my room's a mess. But if it upsets you, go ahead and let it out.